All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am Josette Dubois. I am the Adult Programs Librarian for the Slover Library, and we welcome you to one of our WebEx programs. We have you all muted right now, but if you do want to communicate, if you hover above everyone's name, third from the left, you'll see a chat bubble that says Chat with All. Go ahead and type any questions that you have in there, and Joan will take some time to answer them. Speaking of Joan, this is Joan Motley from Interim Healthcare, and she's here
Hi.
today to speak with us about dementia and the behavior issues and communications techniques. So go ahead and take it away, Joan.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I don't know if any of you were on our previous conversations that I had done just this past month, where I had talked about understanding dementia and the continuum of care. And this is the second in a series that I've created. I am actually the business development representative for Interim Home Care and Hospice team. And our office is here in Virginia Beach, right by Mount Trashmore, if you're familiar. And we actually cover throughout the Hampton Roads area out of this particular location. I actually have an extensive background in Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. And this is the second, like I had mentioned, in a series of presentations that I've created. I actually have 16 different presentations that I've actually developed. And so I developed them as a strategy to try to figure out, how do I get the right information to everyone's laps, that everyone really understands more of a baseline of what are these challenges that we have in our plate, and how do we increase the probability of either sustaining them where they are in our home, or do we understand all the options of where to go from here? And so the behavioral issues that do tend to appear when we are looking at the dementias can tend to be very, very challenging and do play some very big roles impacting, again, our success with maintaining somebody in the home. So I thought this was a very good topic to kind of bring to the table, per se. And we're going to see how quickly I can speak and kind of cover a lot of this information. I do tend to do these presentations in various different types of locations and communities. So bear with me as I do speak, on a quick, in a quick format, only because I'm again trying to crunch a lot of things down right now during the time frame that we have together. So excuse the pace that I'm going to have to keep up. But whatever we don't get through to today, Gisette and I were talking about, continuing it on another conversation that we're going to be doing going into another, was it next week or 2 weeks from now, Gisette? I have to look at my calendar, but we're going to continue it again. So let's go into the first screen, or the second screen in this case. Okay. Oh. Okay, there we go. All right. So, as we start to talk about the behavioral issues that we will tend to see when we're dealing with the dementias, it's important, again, that we kind of establish this baseline of knowledge to really understand what are these different types of diseases that all cause dementia. And so when we know that somebody has a memory decline, heading in the direction of a neurologist is ultimately extremely important. So we establish that baseline. But then we also have to realize that if we start to hear the word dementia over somebody's head, what does this actually mean? People tend to use that definition very loosely. They kind of take that word and throw it out on a table. We really have to understand what it is that we're working with. So when we know that somebody has a form of dementia over their head, we need to realize that we're talking about a chronic disease, a progressive disease, and anyone with a form of dementia, we have to realize that this is never a normal stage of decline. It is never a normal stage of our aging process. And it's important that we determine exactly what type of dementia is this. So when somebody says my loved one has dementia, whether we hear it from a doctor or a neurologist, we really need to understand what type of dementia is it. That's the ultimate question. So Alzheimer's disease is that largest form of dementia. Most commonly diagnosed, it is the sixth leading cause of death in the United States for anyone that is 65 years of age and over. It is a growing epidemic where we have the 5.8 million that we're aware of. Again, the 5.8 million are only the ones that we're aware of because those are the ones that had actually gone down the road to a neurologist to establish a baseline where now we have it documented that yes, this is what we're seeing on scans on the brain. This is the likeliness that this disease is now looking like Alzheimer's disease, perhaps. We have two different types of Alzheimer's disease, early onset and late onset. Early onset, you would have seen if somebody was fairly young. It could be as young as 25, 35 years of age, going to about 65 years of age. The progression of early onset actually goes pretty quickly. We have all these stages that are kind of crunched up together and they kind of go lickety split on somebody. We do tend to see that there's a very strong hereditary link with anybody that has early onset. We do tend to see that because of the young age frame that this individual perhaps has had a career and now they have to retire a lot earlier than they ever would have thought of retiring. And that certainly impacts a family, quite on a quite large scale, because now somebody can no longer be that primary resource as far as financially to contribute to a household. Now somebody else has to come along and be that financial provider as well as that caregiver. And so that early onset situation in a home is very challenging, as all the dementias are, but in particular now with this young onset case, somebody does need to retire a lot earlier, as I had said. And we do tend to see a very strong hereditary link through families, so we really do need to keep in mind the importance of going to that neurologist and determining exactly what this is looking like so that our own families understand what we could be impacted with down the line. How is this going to be impacting us, certainly, financially as well, and sustaining somebody in the home. Late onset is now we're going to see somebody more so into the 70s and 80s. We tend to see a lot more late onset cases surrounding us. And by the way, early onset cases make up about 5% of our general population. With late onset now, those that are into the 70s and 80s, the pace of the disease will just go a wee bit slower than it had with early onset. The biggest contributor for late onset happens to be age. So as we're all inching closer into our 80s, we all become at a more higher risk. So something for us to look forward to, besides all the other aging complications that we have to think about. We have to, keep in mind, though, that as we're seeing, that this is going at a slower pace, as a result, many families are taken off guard because we tend to kind of coast along, and we coast along thinking, okay, we got this under control. And as a result, as we're coasting, we start to see more and more challenges. And as these more challenges and crises hit, we kind of have to figure out, all right, how are we going to rebound from all these things? And again, sustaining them in the home, there are many obstacles, many things that we have to consider. But it's extremely important that we understand this diagnosis and the progression of the disease ultimately. Vascular dementia, by the way, is the second most common in line. We do tend to hear vascular dementia cases quite frequently, actually. I think I actually heard about 3 last week alone. We are now going to have someone that perhaps has had coronary issues and has suffered from a stroke. Sometimes after we have these types of complications, there could be a memory loss. And many times after the memory loss has become more evident, we might begin to see more behavioral issues. And if that is the case, we might begin to see where there is a resemblance of now the characteristics of Alzheimer's disease again. So in this type of scenario, you could have vascular dementia as the main diagnosis, that initial diagnosis, and then with all the behavioral issues that kind of develop as time goes on and more damage is being done to the brain, we might begin to see more of the characteristics of Alzheimer's disease. In that case, we might have on our plate what is called a mixed dementia. The third most common in line is Lewy body dementia. We tend to hear Lewy body dementia many times connected with Parkinson's. By the way, anyone that has Parkinson's disease, it is important that we recognize a good 60 to 80% of those that might develop Parkinson's many times do tend to show us a form of dementia as time continues. We did hear more about Lewy body dementia, especially after Robin Williams had taken his life. there was that diagnosis that did come to everyone's knowledge, even a year after he had passed. In which case, though, with Lewy body dementia, this means that Robin Williams, as well as anyone else that has this type of decline, would have exhibited great hallucinations and delusions, which can be very scary and very challenging. Besides the fall risks, the heightened fall risk factor. There's certainly more that goes into this, but I'm just trying to kind of keep, crunched down and a little bit brief here. The fourth most common in line, frontemporal lobe dementia, that does make up a good 10 to 15% of our population. We do tend to see more women than men that develop this, and a lot more women into the 50s and 60s. This can be a very challenging dementia to diagnose, because we might take a look at somebody's normal personality and say, well, they've always acted like this. But if we had gone to that neurologist and established the baseline, in this case, we would have seen great damage on the frontemporal lobe. Any kind of damage that's ever done to our frontemporal lobe, part of the brain, will greatly affect anybody's ability to rationalize and reason, therefore making it extremely inappropriate decision making, very poor rationale in their everyday performance of completing tasks. So again, it can be very difficult for families to recognize what is the difference here with their normal personality, ultimately. Okay, all right, third screen, actually. Okay, so when you think of someone's response to dementia, I can actually count on about 5 fingers the number of people that have actually approached me directly and said, "Hey, Joan, I've now come down with this diagnosis. I now need to now become knowledgeable about what to plan for and consider, especially for my family." So ultimately, it is very, very rare that you have somebody that is, acknowledging the disease, is aware of it, is accepting the disease, a diagnosis. We do tend to see that denial will come into play as the disease progresses, but it's very rare also, even in beginning stages, that you have somebody that is very, accepting of this knowledge. Of course, this is a huge blow, so who wants to be accepting of the knowledge? But it does kind of break down into 3 different kinds of categories when we talk about how accepting somebody is. And we need to realize that a good 50% of those that are aware that they have the symptoms, will argue with you. They're going to get real angry. Nope, I don't have this type of dementia. That doctor doesn't know what they're talking about. I don't care what kind of degrees on their wall. Nope, I'm absolutely fine. I am not going back. I'm fine, And so we do tend to see that there is a lot of anger and resentment. We do have a good 30% that now become aware that they might have the disease, but they also are very, very nervous. They're very scared. They're very clingy. They're very frantic. They might want to follow us around. Shadowing is actually a terminology that we might use for this particular situation. They're very afraid of being alone. So if you have them in the home and perhaps we spent all day with them, but now we're leaving, and they're calling us a few minutes later. Hey, I haven't seen you. Are you coming back? Well, I was just there all day, So of course they're not going to remember necessarily that you had already spent all that time, but they get very, very nervous. When are you coming? When are you coming back? I need you here. What's going on? Where are you going? So we might see a lot of that nervousness. Then we have a good 20%, which are very, very challenging folks out there. This particular 20% are aware that they have the decline, but they're finding it real hard to hide it. They're trying desperately to maintain their independence. They're very, very resistant of all interference, any kind of help coming on into the house, whether it's family or hired help. They want to stay in their home. They push back any kind of help at all. Don't touch my stuff. Don't touch my refrigerator. My food is fine. Leave me alone, right? So because they are very angry and they're trying very hard to hide this decline and very resentful and pushing back on this care, they're relying a lot on routine. Just their everyday, motions, okay? But we have to realize that because they're trying to sustain themselves, just relying on their own little routine, resisting all other help, this 20% actually is not only very challenging for families when we're trying to introduce any kind of care and any interaction with them, but they actually are the ones that actually decline faster than the other categories because they are, again, resisting all help. And so you might see that there is going to be a faster decline with them because now maybe they're not taking those medications. They're not, allowing the assistance with their ADLs, which is very important. They're not following up with the doctors and so forth on their own, or keeping track of things on their own. Okay, going to move on. All right, so engagement, we have to adapt to their new abilities. So let's understand what's going on in the brain for a minute. So structurally, we're going from a full-size brain down now down to only 1/3 of its original size. So it's really shrinking down. So as the brain cells are dying, we're seeing all these different parts of the brain that are equally beginning to decline because the neurons are also beginning to die off, and you have the accumulation of all the tangles that are inside the neurons and the plaque that's building up on the outside of the neuron. But ultimately, as the brain is shrinking down, it's going to rob them of their abilities to remember various things, everything that we take for granted, all of our movements, and with things that we do naturally are all beginning to shrink down, and that ability to recall how to complete a task will equally decline. One of the first parts of our brain that begins to develop actually is called the limbic system. It's controlling our ability to understand, hunger, a thirst, adapting to our emotions, understanding, recognizing temperature. And when you really think about that particular part of the brain, this kind of makes sense because if this is one of the first parts that actually develop, well, that actually is one of the things that we begin to see babies perhaps react to first, that reaction to hunger and thirst and feeling cold. The left lobe of our brain is what is housing all of our vocabulary and all of our speech. That part of the brain is actually shrinking faster than our right lobe. So as time goes on, we see their ability to understand appropriateness of how to speak, finding the right terminology for things is their capacity level to perform that is shrinking down in size. Very challenging to hold a conversation, let alone initiate a conversation. Looking at an item and forgetting what an item is called. So that ability to hold on to vocabulary is held on the left side of the brain, and that begins to shrink actually faster than the right. The right side of the brain, though, is holding on to that small ability to make small chit chat with you. Hey, how's the weather? What's going on? Oh, I like your dress, right? So sometimes we might be interacting with somebody, and we become very fooled because they're able to make this small conversation piece. And by the way, the more intelligent the individual is, the more educated they are, the more they are able to, or how they've exceeded with having a voice of authority in life, great achievements career-wise, a level of independence. I mean, these people overall with those types of characteristics are able to ultimately hide the decline for really, really long stretches of time. Okay, so they pull on their reserve. They're pulling on all those abilities and all those strengths that they've accumulated over life. And so they're able to make that small chit chat and kind of give you a whole roundabout response to a question, making you think that they answered the question, but truly have not, right? But I also, on top of this, the right side of the brain also is going to hold on to that rhythm and that music ability to recognize rhythm in music. So that's why we might see that as the stages of decline increase, that even though I can't follow a plot or a dialogue on TV, get the TV off, by the way, get the music on. That's what you should be doing, because that, again, that ability to retain music and rhythm is stored on the right side of the brain. And if you put those golden oldies on and some Frank Sinatra on, you're going to see my fingers snapping and my feet tapping, and I'm going to be singing along. Unfortunately, one of the bad things that also, though, is held on that right side of the brain is vulgarity. Okay, so it wouldn't be any surprise to me if all of a sudden we start to see things come out that they've never said before, but all of a sudden now we start to see a lot of curse words, because that ability to retain curse words, that is stored on the right side of the brain. We have another weird system of the brain that's called the amygdala system. This particular part of the brain actually is storing our ability to recognize fright and flight and or am I fighting back? So my reaction, am I fearful of the situation? Am I gonna run and hide? And am I frightened by it? Am I gonna fight back to somebody? So that is a part of the brain that handles our ability, that kind of stores that ability to understand, being frightened and how to react to something. The brain cortex, which now is encompassing our frontemporal lobe. This part of the brain is now holding all of our ability to make decisions, to understand impulses, to make choices, understanding empathy. So when you think about this part of the brain storing our ability to rationalize and reason, right, and making choices, believe it or not, the brain cortex that houses our frontemporal lobe, this part of the brain actually develops and stops developing for men around the age of 21. Okay, for women, our brain cortex, the frontemporal lobe, does continue to develop and strengthen. Go us! And it continues to strengthen and stops around 23, 22, 23. So it kind of makes sense when you realize, okay, yeah, our ability to rationalize and reason is very different from men, right? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, kind of thing, right? Well, that's because that part of the brain is stopping developing at a certain point for one, type of individual, and it can increases longer for the females. Okay, I'm gonna go onward from here. All right, so ultimately, what are we beginning to see? We're beginning to see very impulsive behavior. We're beginning to see a lot of insensitive comments, their inability to really recognize that they are hurting our feelings. We're going to see a lot more anger and frustration because they're losing the ability to communicate, to understand the appropriate responses to things. And certainly their frustration will grow more and more as they feel that that they can't retain this new information that we're saying to them in the here and now. By the way, the hippocampus is what is storing all of our short-term memory, but as it shrinks down and it can't retain something new, you would have seen a lot more repetitiveness with this person. And as a result of their repetitiveness, constantly asking you the same thing, you will see, more and more of that frustration, eluding, and perhaps more of the anger, coming out in them. You'll see that you're going to start to rely more and more on the long-term memory bank as a result. But even then, the long-term memory bank that houses all those great stories about childhood and past and so forth will equally begin to shrink down over time. And we'll see that if they can't quite pull out the same information, all those great stories that they would share with us, they will ultimately become quieter and quieter on us. We are going to see more increased hallucinations and delusions, a great deal of paranoia and fixation. Fixation on a thing, fixation on a scenario. You have my keys. Where's my car? Where's my wallet? You took my money. So we tend to see a great deal of finger pointing and accusations, especially paranoia. Who are you talking to on the phone? I know you're talking about me. Who are you talking about? So you see a lot of that type of behavior start to appear at this point. And wandering certainly does become a concern, even though somebody has never wandered before. Let's keep in mind that a good 60 to 80% of those do tend to wander. And many times it's because, I want to keep busy. It could be late in the day where we start to see a lot of the hallucinations and delusions because of the sundowning components. But I want to keep busy, I have things to do, and so in their mind, they can still do X, Y, and Z. So they might believe that they still are going to work. So they might begin to walk out a door on you. They never wandered out before, but they, chances are they will at some point if you have not seen that characteristic yet. So as their inabilities are increasing, they are going to become more and more reliant on somebody, on you, especially on you if you've never gotten used to care other than someone, being, other than it coming from yourself. So it's very important as we take a look at the decline process that you do realize that as early in the game, introducing care is vitally important. As early in the disease process that you're introducing care, coming from someone other than direct family members is huge in your success with maintaining this person in their home. Okay, next screen. So changes in structure and chemistry. So let's understand a lot of other things that are also beginning to change on us. So their visual field is changing. Their depth perception will become more and more of a challenge. We're going to see that, as a result of their having poor depth perception, they might not understand how to step down from a curb. We might begin to see a lot more of those falls. So when you realize what's going on with their field of vision, this will help you understand, how to react to their nervousness, perhaps in walking, or their gait will slowly change to a shuffle. They're not going to pick up their feet as well as you and I do ultimately. And when you think of how the visual field is changing, for those of us that have ever had the fun experience per se of ever going snorkeling or scuba diving, we'd have those glasses on our face there, and if we had this type of glass on our face, realize that in the beginning stages of the disease, this is equivalent to what they can see, okay? The same size is what I'm talking about. So can't quite see to my right very well or my left very well. It's a little blurry on both sides. So I really got to turn my whole head around and kind of look down and around, okay? As the disease moves on, that field of vision continually decreases. And now if we were to hold binoculars in our hands, now if we held those binoculars, now we begin to see that, wow, that field of vision has greatly narrowed, right? And so now within that same space, equivalent to binoculars is what they're able to see. So we see how it's crunched down again, right? So yeah, I got to really turn my head around and look around in all directions to see what's going on around me. And as the disease moves on, we then begin to see that field of vision continue to become more of this challenge where it's declining, and now it's equivalent to if we were holding a oh gosh, what do you call it? Like a pirate. I'm losing my ability to remember even what is that particular type of I'm drawing a blank. Well, you know what I'm talking about. I'm drawing a blank right now. But basically, if we were to hold this telescope in our hands, okay, and in the same kind of narrow spatial vision, okay, ultimately, all right. So, yep, they're going to have great difficulty looking on down and stepping over things the way you and I would have, okay. So, auditory changes. Again, left lobe shrinking down for the vocabulary. Right lobe retaining that small chit-chat ability, coming back with those, staple words, phrases. We got the rhythm and the music going on over here, and we have some of those curse words that might begin to manifest. And we begin to see that there are some safety awareness skills that are slowly beginning to leave us. But I remain very, very curious about everything. And so I might begin to, get into that car and think that it's still okay to drive, because my ability to really recognize, safety concerns, keeping track of what is really going to be harmful to me, the stove, the microwave, losing the abilities to really handle a lot of these devices will also continue to decline. So we have to keep in mind that if we do have somebody in a home, what are they able to still do safely? And of course, I think I can still drive, because I'm just driving local. Well, what's local? It could be 1 block, 5 blocks. What is local to this person? And actually, it makes no difference what your definition of local is, because they still have to process the information. They still have to process what's going on in front of them, process it, understand it, and then know ultimately how to react to this thing. And all processing and reaction time is greatly slowed and delayed. And we have the inability to recognize the smells of various things. So that recognition of smells is also going to decline. They're not going to be able to detect body odor as well as you and I will. Spoiled food ability, yep, not going to really recognize that something is not so fresh in that refrigerator. And ultimately, my taste will also begin to change. I'll always desire the sweet and salty items, of course, but I will lose interest in eating a lot of various things. And so, you know, you could see out of pure boredom, maybe somebody is just eating a lot because they're forgetting what else to do during the day. So we might see a great increase in somebody's weight, but equally, they might forget to eat. So they are going to scale down, and we might begin to see a weight loss. Okay, next screen. So let's understand, you know, a positive approach, you know, methods to consider. You know, now that we understand they really can't see very well on their, you know, their right and their left side without turning their entire head. Be very mindful of how we are approaching them, and not to sneak up from behind, and not just try to tap somebody on the shoulder. Always come straight into you know, our field of vision as I've described it to you. So basically, standing ultimately 6 feet away, ideally, and begin to approach the person directly in their eyesight and this field of vision, and begin to wave and introduce themselves. Introduce yourself. And smile, so they understand that you are a warm person, that you are a caring individual, and identify yourself so they can, you know, understand, you know, who you are. Offer to shake their hand. If you start to extend your hand to them in their field of vision, chances are they will reach out their hand equally. And then what you're going to want to do is, you know, attempt to move to a hand underhand position, because then ultimately you'll be able to be in control. So if I had somebody here with me, I'd be able to kind of show you what I mean. But basically, you'd have to, when you do this type of movement with the hand, you're able to then kind of get in control and get to their side, and then kind of steer them along like a little rudder of a boat. So you're able to guide them more easily if you do this hand gesture. And you need to speak slowly and give them a chance to process the information of what you're saying. Of course, now I'm speaking fast, but certainly if we're sitting down in front of somebody that is, you know, has a form of dementia, we do need to give them a chance to process what it is that we're saying, and we have to. We're assuming that they can hear us, and keeping in mind that many times hearing loss also is a very big contributor to dementia. So keep in mind they might not have heard us, but we do need to speak slowly and give them a chance to process what we're saying, and then to ultimately react. So do not argue, do not say no, do not order around, do not condescend. Rule number one is never ever argue really with somebody that has a form of dementia, because you will lose. If you spent a great deal of time, if you're somebody that always spends a great deal of time arguing and debating with this individual, realize that, you know, that the individual has a form of dementia. So I can no longer rationalize and reason. So I might come to you and kind of try to put you in your place and say, nope, you know, you did it, you know, and pointing the finger and so forth. You'd be very wise in taking that very big, deep breath and you know, giving yourself even just a few minutes time out, but do not come back and attempt to you know, correct them. The best way to go about doing this is also to try to redirect them. I'm going to go into this further if we go into the next screen. So keeping in mind that they're doing the best that they can, so we have to try to de-escalate the situation. So, you know, sometimes people say, oh, well, I have to correct them because, you know, they're wrong. Well, you know, realize too, if you spent time constantly correcting them because you think that they're wrong, realize that they're going into their own reality right now, right? So don't feel guilty per se that we might have to say a white lie about a situation. You know, if they were to say, oh, my loved one, you know, where's my mom? Oh, your mom passed. Well, of course, if you try to give me this kind of information, you might see that I'm going to become very, very upset and very fixated on that for a while. But I'm equally going to forget that you had said this thing to me that upset me greatly. And then you might bring it up again, and that becomes like opening up a wound all over again. So we need to, realize that they are in their own reality right now. And because they're pulling more and more in the long-term memory bank, what year frame are they working with? What time frame in their life are they working with? Because that is their reality. So it's important that us as caregivers and families now kind of to help to de-escalate a situation is we need to go into their reality. Right. And if we need to kind of back off and give them a little bit of space because they're being confrontational, we'll then certainly back off. Approaching them, offering them your hand, going to their dominant side so you can help to steer them along, getting to their level, being in sync with them. If they're very anxious about something, oh my God, look at those kids. I see those kids. What are they doing that they shouldn't be doing? Oh my goodness, absolutely right. They shouldn't be there. So we have to kind of get into their reality. And then, as an example of this, somebody said to me, my mother always saw, children outside and she thought that they all had to go to school. Well, of course, it would be great if school was open. Yep, we got to get them off to school, Mom. Hey guys, come on, this is where we have to go, So kind of playing along with it and letting them know that you're understanding their concerns, you're validating their concerns, but we're also helping to redirect them now onto a task, onto something that perhaps that we can associate with, that we can connect with for ourselves, giving them something of value, something important to do, something that has meaning, helping to water the flowers perhaps, so we have to validate, but do not correct them. And as we are validating, we're going to help them realize, okay, we have their back. We're going to help them solve this particular issue. Again, redirecting onto a totally different subject matter or something that they could have found meaning with, and something, even putting on the music, for instance. I'm going to kind of go into some more examples of this as we move along. So we need to attend to their needs. We need to be willing to go with them in their story. The more you attempt to correct and battle it out with them, the more you're going to become more frustrated as a caregiver, as a family member, especially continuing to get the individual with a decline that much more, anxious and upset as well, because they're going to think that this is still something that's happening in front of them. So we have to, validate it and then redirect their attention. Okay, we're going to move on. So understanding why, it's very important that we understand why the individual is exhibiting what they're exhibiting. We have to understand, what exactly is the problem, being proactive, not reactive. So let's understand, what is this? Before we label something a problem, before everybody starts to run down the road and try to correct anything with medications, let's understand what this problem is. Is this person in potential discomfort? Do they have a fever? Are they in pain from something? Is there a UTI going on that we don't even know about? UTIs are very common with somebody that has a form of dementia. Because they become very dehydrated, they're forgetting to drink water the way you and I do. So UTIs are very common and very painful. And we do tend to see a lot of unique changes in somebody's behavior. So what is the environment this person is in? Is there a great deal of noise and stimuli going on around us? Do we need to kind of redirect this person into a quieter atmosphere? What kind of activity is this person trying to perform? Are they able to complete this task on their own? Are they finding it too complicated? Or do they even understand how to do it? Did we put something in front of them and say, hey, go for it, because we always assume that they remembered how to do it? Well, chances are that item will remain right there, and they're not going to have done it because they do benefit from a great deal of ongoing encouragement and guidance and support, especially as the disease moves forward, especially going from a stage 4 and into a stage 5. We definitely see that having that one-on-one is very, very beneficial to them. So we can help them avoid the frustration of completing a task. Seeking to understand why are they behaving a certain way rather than what are they specifically doing. What are all these other factors that we need to consider are going on in the area? Are they wearing tight clothes? Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? When was the last time they ate or they drank? Do they need to utilize the facilities? So we need to really consider what's going on around them before we start to label something a problem. Okay. We're going to go on. So changing habits and behaviors. So we want to try to encourage the person to participate as much as possible, regardless of their abilities. They can still do a lot, but now things are in modification. So we have to modify their activities. And again, having that person one-on-one to really break down the steps so that they can benefit from seeing how to complete a puzzle without becoming so frustrated. Here, I'm going to take this piece. You want to take that piece? Okay, great. Hey, let's see if this fits together. So really breaking it down and talking them through it. Filling the day with meaning, doing with the person, but not to the person, not enabling them, in other words. Okay, and having productive activities. Does that particular activity have value? Is it making a difference? Do I feel like I'm contributing to something of value? Okay, we're going to change the screen because the more value that I feel like I'm contributing to, the more likeliness you will see this person want to stick to that particular activity. If I'm bored, you are going to see the person will get up and wander around more, kind of get into more and more mischief. And ultimately, the more bored I am, perhaps the more hallucinations we would have seen, and the more confrontational behaviors we would have equally have seen. So keeping them busy and occupied is very important. So, what kind of activity are we doing with this person? When we do an activity, we are building trust. We're giving them a sense of purpose, a feeling that they matter and that they're adding something, they're contributing to something. So something of value, again, would be helping to fold the laundry, drying the dishes, watering the plants, helping to feed the dog, taking a broom and sweeping the porch. So thinking of those skills, those things that we can still do, but modification, instead of you just taking the lead, instead of just the caregiver just doing for them all the time, realize they can still do a lot. And we're also able to then ultimately, keep them occupied and give them the stimuli that they so much need. So setting up, cleaning up, building things together, going to a craft store and getting some items that they can actually build alongside you. Okay. So going with the flow would be very important. Of course, we all wake up in the morning and we have our little honey-do list and we feel really accomplished when we get all these different things done, right? But now we have to make sure that we realize that because now we're going into their reality. Today's accomplishment might be that we have gotten up and we had a nice breakfast, and maybe we were lucky enough that we were able to accomplish a shower, right? But don't worry about the laundry so much. Don't worry about, the dusting and the vacuuming. We have to slow our pace, not be in a rush with them, be in the moment with them as much as possible, tapping into their memories and their skills that they still possess. And greatly adjusting your own expectations. Once more, if we try to accomplish many things in one day, not only will we become more and more overwhelmed and frustrated, but they also will sense our frustration or being being angry maybe faster. Maybe our temperament would have changed because now we are overwhelmed, that much more overwhelmed, and perhaps we don't have that much help going on around us. So we need to adjust our own expectations of what they're able to still accomplish in a day. Okay, I'm going to move on. So we have to keep in mind, when we think of the safety risks, is it still appropriate this person is in a home, right? And or are we working and maybe the person's alone, in that environment for a certain number of hours? So do they live alone? Are we able to juggle going back and forth with them without, pulling out our own hair, trying to figure out, okay, time frames that we can get there in time? Are they showing us a lot of anxiety if we were to leave them at home? Are we seeing that they're not even completing their own activity of daily living without our constant guidance and support? Anticipating the changes and understanding the progression of the disease is very important for us to realize, with the timing of keeping this person without supervision, without this help. How much longer could we have done that? How much longer could we have sustained this? Many times I see that families might have a form of denial in really recognizing that, change is needed now, not to wait for this crisis to hit. I've heard some really scary stories out there, and it's upsetting to see that sometimes, somebody that should not be left alone might be left alone. And we really need to ask some other, an important question. And one of the big questions I always, try to have somebody reflect upon is, if this person was alone for any amount of time at all, would this person have ever known what to have done to solve a problem, to step in if there was an emergency, to have known how to call 911? What would their reaction have been if there was truly an emergency? So keeping in mind that if their reaction would have been to try to track us down, then clearly they would not have been able to handle those steps to solve that problem without the interference, without us having to step on in. So getting opinions from others, where have other people have gone for, let's say, not only care, but maybe, senior centers and things of that nature. I can give you, information concerning that. One thing to always keep in mind, though, as we know that somebody has never been introduced to care before, and again, not introduced to care coming from someone other than family, all right? We need to realize that even though it's great if we got this person out to an outside activity, the big thing that you'll always want to do first is always get this person used to care and get it done inside their comfort base, those four walls of either their home or whatever their new home environment is. That should be the big thing that you lay down the groundwork first for, okay? If you're able to get them comfortable with accepting care in their own home, then the sky's the limit. Okay, then we can then branch off and delve into those outside senior centers and activity locations. But you definitely want to establish something involving the care in their own domain, because it plays such a massive role in your success with keeping them there to their last breath. I can't highlight that enough. Consider the health of the primary caregiver. Sometimes you already have an aging caregiver that's trying to sustain this whole picture. Men tend to be a little bit more reluctant to have the interference, to have the help come on in. Perhaps it is their own guilt per se, or that mentality of, nope, I am the man of the house, I should be able to do this, and they tend to be very resistant for any kind of interference or family involvement or assistance coming in, paid help coming on in. Women tend to be a little bit more flexible and willing to allow that through the doors a lot faster. But we do need to keep in mind, what is the health of the primary caregiver? What are they trying to sustain? And the importance of laying down the groundwork of assistance in that home. Let's keep in mind, it's one thing to say, don't feel guilty, right? And I often say to caregivers, try to, brush a lot of that guilt off your shoulders and realize how far you have already come in a process of being that go-to, being that support system. Where have we already been with this person's decline over a period of time? And where are we now? And so, be reflective of that and be easy on yourself when we have to get to a point where now we can no longer sustain this picture either in a home, or we realize that, yeah, I do need the help. The more help we have, the more the primary caregiver's stress and own burnout will continue to diminish. When you don't have family involvement, when you don't have other family members really stepping in to help, this will play very big roles on a primary caregiver's own health and well-being. And we do tend to see great declines in those primary caregivers when we do not have enough support from family, even family involvement. Okay. And I also want to say to you, as far as the do not feel guilty part, when we think about the assisted livings, or having to relocate somebody, realize that even though it's a hard decision to make and go in those directions, that ultimately, and if we're choosing the right location, these are buildings that are, were created for the purpose of ongoing care. I mean, they have certain licensing codes, so they know what they're doing, and they should know what they're doing, right? I can certainly give you feedback on different places to have considered for a loved one, but ultimately there is a great deal of support and care that can be done there. Okay, I'm going to change. So ultimately, too, when we think about the timing of help, care, removing this person, whatever it challenges on our plate, what is this individual exhibiting to us? Do we see a great deal of anxiety every day? Do we see that they are very, very fearful of being alone? Are we beginning to recognize that they are wandering? They're kind of pacing around. Are they walking out the door? Are they going down to the neighbor's house constantly because they don't know what else to do? So are they going into a store and they're going down one aisle and we're going down the other? Are they becoming forgetful about utilizing appliances? Are they leaving the stovetop on? I wanted to make a pot of tea, but now I left the water, going, and now it's burnt out all the water in the pot, and now we have another potential fire hazard. Are they leaving the water running in the bathroom and forgetting to turn off that faucet? Are they not detecting spoiled food? Because again, that sense of smell issue I had mentioned to you earlier, we might take out something from the refrigerator and not realize that this is no longer safe to have eaten. Are they leaving things up on the counter and not properly covering things up and packaging things up properly to put back into a refrigerator? Are they taking their medications properly without our involvement? Certainly, when somebody even gets into a stage 5, where now we are really getting more involved in giving them a lot of reminders and direction for our meal prep and our medication management, just because you were so kind to help me create a little pill box, and now you're calling me, hey, Ma, you take your 9 o'clock morning pill. Don't assume that just you constantly guiding me and reminding me to do these things, that this is going to be sufficient. These meds that we take, these medications for the dementia are extremely important, that we do not skip a beat, and that we always take them very consistently, building up our tolerance in our bodies for these medications, building up the medication in our body to the point where we're going to be able to start to see perhaps an effect on somebody, for the better, knock on wood, for the better, but do not just leave it in their lap to attempt to organize. They're not going to be able to detect those odors. So, we might see that somebody's hygiene is failing, and we might say, hey, did you take a shower yesterday? Well, yeah, I took a shower. Look, I'm all ready to go. I got my favorite outfit on, So in their mind, again, they're pulling from the long-term memory bank. I know at one point in time I took a shower for sure, right? But I'm all ready for the day. I'm good to go, So they're not going to recognize that there is an odor now coming from them. And how well are they dressing? Are they still dressing appropriately? I know somebody that insisted on wearing dungaree pants in the summer. until finally the person was really quite hot, and the daughter was finally able to take those dungaree pants off the father and put them away finally. It's difficult getting a lot of these items out of their hands and their control. That's a whole other topic. Okay, I'm going to go on. All right, so finally,
has left the meeting.
So finally, with interim home care, we provide an array of different services. So we have the companion care and personal care that I help to coordinate. We're very flexible with any of the days and hours that somebody might choose. There is no set number of days of a week. There is only a 4-hour minimum that we ever ask. We also have skilled care and rehabilitative care that can be offered with a doctor's authorization. And we also have our hospice care, which is our highest level of care that any one of us could ever have tapped into. And that also could be provided in somebody's home or wherever that loved one might be, residing at this point in time. So we should be looking at all the positive things that somebody can still do, not necessarily reflecting on everything that is lost, but focusing on what they can still do and seeing the importance of your role as a caregiver, which you have a very special hat that is on your head. If you are a caregiver, it's a very difficult role, but a very important role. But I'm here to assist anybody that might need additional help and guidance and support. And I am the go-to here for any implementation of care and resources for the families that ever reach out to me. So there you go. I crunched it all into an hour, so I did pretty good. Anybody have any questions?
I'm going to unmute now in case you have questions for Joan. Christina or Corinne, did you have any questions?
Anybody want to go over anything in particular? Nope.
Don't have any questions? All right.
All righty. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on. And if there's anything I can do for you, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I think it's on the last screen, Gisette.
I'll go ahead and move that forward.
That is my contact information should you want to reach out to me, 406-4236. Okay. Thank you.
And please keep an eye out on Eventbrite and on our website, sloverlibrary.com, for more of our programs. We hope to see you there, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.